Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. I kind of have this window sort of heart card here. I'm using the Hearts Alive die by Simon Says Stamp. It's a new one with their newest release. And I'm using my Ganzai Tambi watercolors. I'm going to be using number 32, number 34, and number 37. So red, pink, and purplish. So I'm going to take these out and get ready for my watercolor. I've cut this piece of Canson XL mixed media paper to 5 by 5 inches. And now I'm trying to sort of center a 4 1/4 measurement. So I can just sort of see, once I trim it out to 4 1/4 to fit A2 size, where my colors ought to be. But I want some flexibility in where I place it on my card base, and you'll kind of see later. But this is just a guide. So I'm going to spray it with some water first, and it curls up as usual, but I just take my paper pierce and I just poke it in the middle, and after I paint a little bit, it flattens out. You could tape it to a board or tape it to your craft mat or something like that if you wanted to. I'm just a little bit too lazy to do that. Anyway, so I'm going to take my reddish color and I'm going to just kind of swipe it back and forth. I've got some water on my brush as well as the water that I already put on my cardstock. And I'm just going to make this a really smooth watercolor. So once I get about 1/3 of the way down, I'm looking at those pencil guidelines that I drew. I'm going to move on to the pinkish red. And you can see I put a little bit more water than I used on the red, unfortunately. But that's okay, because as long as I just continue to drop some color in there, it'll get darker. And I can always add a second layer after it dries if I wanted it to be even darker than that. Next, I'm going to take my purple, and I think I definitely put a little bit too much water on this one because it's pretty diluted. But that's okay. I'm just going to keep working it on here, and I'm definitely trying to get a really smooth color by going back and forth into full motions, like all the way to the edge of the cardstock. Sometimes when I feel like I'm not getting enough color, I kind of tap it in there. So you can see I sort of just tapped my brush in there. And then I just moved it around after I got it on the cardstock. So now I'm going to grab a paper towel here, and this brush holds so much water. It's a number 12 round brush. And so I'm going to wipe the water off of it so that it's pretty dry. So when I get some paint on it, the paint is going to be really dark. And I'm just going to keep going back and forth. And again, this is one of those situations where you never really know when to stop, and you can just keep going and going and going. I am going to stop soon, but I just wanted to mention really quick while I'm working through these details here that I use my Ganzai Tambi mostly for background washes. They're pretty opaque. You can obviously dilute them and they get lighter, but it's really a nice background color because you can get some really vibrant color, especially if you add multiple layers. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit more purple here and just try to get these colors to blend in the middle. And notice that I have colors that are very close to each other that blend next to each other. So the purple and the pink, and then the pink and the red, and that definitely makes it easier to get a nice blend. Anyway, so I'm going to take my die and I'm going to cut it right out of the middle of this cardstock. I'm going to keep the 2 large hearts and I'm going to put the rest off to the side. I'm going to fill those in later. And then I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to trim it on both sides to about 4 inches wide. So I kind of trimmed a little bit off of each side, back and forth until I got it the way I wanted it, about 4 inches, maybe a little bit over, like 4 1/8. Now I'm going to center it onto my card base, and I'm going to mark the corners here. And this is not really an exact science, and that's why my watercolor panel is a little bit larger from bottom to top so that I have some wiggle room to place it once I cut the die out of my card base. So I'm going to open up my card base and I'm going to try to center my die between those marks. Now the marks are from the inside of the cut line, so I really can't see that with this die. So I'm just doing my best to make sure that I'm about in the middle there. So once I get it positioned, I'll put it in, secure it into place with some surgical tape, and then I'll run that through my Big Shot. And I'm going to keep the smaller white hearts, and I'll use those on the inside with the other pink hearts that I have. Next, I'm going to add a border for around my watercolor panel. So I'm going to mark where my watercolor panel ends on both sides. So I'm just going to place it over my base, and I'll mark a pencil line on each side. And then I'm going to take my T-square and I'm going to measure 1/8 of an inch outside that pencil line I just made. And that is going to give me 1/8 of an inch of a border using washi tape. And then I'm going to draw a couple of other guidelines using my T-square, because you can get a perpendicular line here so you know it's straight up and down. And that's my guide for putting the washi tape. So my washi tape is just some Stampin' Up! Tape, which I think is discontinued, retired. But any kind of black and white stripe I think looks really nice with the pink. So I'm going to just put that against the pencil lines that I made. And then I'll take a scissor and I'll just cut the edges off on all 4 sides. And then I noticed that I covered part of the heart. So I just took my paper pierce and I just kind of peeled it away a little bit. The watercolor panel is going to cover all but 1/8 of an inch of this washi tape, so it's not really a big deal. Now I'm going to put my pink hearts on the inside, and I wish I would have put the sentiments on them first, but I wasn't thinking because kids were talking to me. So I'm going to go ahead and put these on. I'm just going to put some Tombow glue on the back. You want to keep it pretty centered on the heart, because if it seeps out the side, it's going to be tacky, and then the card will kind of stick when you close it. So what I'm going to do is close it and put it through the top. So I'll just place it right there so that it lines up exactly where it should, as if it was inlaid, but it's going to go through the front and stick to the back. So I did that with the other heart, and then I did it with those 3 small white hearts the same exact way. And those were so small that I used my tweezers, and I also used my Zig 2A glue pen instead because they were so small. Okay, so now I'm going to adhere the watercolor panel, and I'm going to take some Tombow Mono Multi glue, because I want to make sure I have some time to sort of play around with it and move it around to make sure it's exactly on top of the die cut that I cut out of the card base. And notice I used Tombow around, but then for the little intricate parts I used my Zig 2A because I didn't want it seeping outside of the cardstock. So I'm going to be really careful here. I'll lay it right on top, and it should fit perfectly, but you might have to kind of maneuver it around a little bit. So I just want to get kind of it in place, and then I'm going to use my fingers, and I'm also using my tweezers, and I'm speeding this up a little bit to kind of squeeze things back and forth to make sure that everything is lined up perfectly. So once I get that all finished, I'm going to just sort of flatten everything out with my hands and hold it into place for just a little bit. And I might move it around just to make sure that I've got it even on both sides. I wish I would have used my Zig 2A pen on the very edge of my watercolor panel before adhering it to the base, because the Tombow is kind of trying to be careful so that it wouldn't seep out the side. But anyway, so I just lifted up in the few areas where it was coming up a little bit, and I put some glue pen underneath there, and then I just pressed it down to make sure that it wasn't lifting up anywhere. Next, I'm going to add my sentiments. I'm using the set called Love. It's just called Love by Simon Says Stamp. Again, it's from their newest release. And I'm going to stamp hugs on one heart, kisses on the other one with some Versamark ink. I'm going to carefully sprinkle it with some white embossing powder, and then I'll heat it to set it. There's also an and in this set, so I'm going to close the card to make sure that I could see it, and then I'm going to put it right there in the middle between these 2 hearts, and it's actually stamping on the inside of the card. And so that is a card for today. So something a little bit different. I like how this is an intricate die, yet I have the support of the card base. So I have 2 layers to make sure I have enough strength on those little intricate pieces from the die. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.